Welcome. My name is Ryan Thompson. I'm the department chair here in our design department, and I'm standing in for John Baker, who's the gallery director of the Searbook Gallery, kind of interim gallery director. So we have an interim standing in for an interim. And we have Cecil McDonald Jr. With us tonight. His work is in the gallery. Many of you have seen it. If you have not seen it, you'll see it in a little bit after his talk. I'm really excited about the show personally. And I've talked to many of you about it too. I'm going to introduce him via his biography. So I'm going to read off of this, and then we'll hear from Cecil. So thanks for being here. Cecil McDonald Jr. uses photography, video, and text to explore the intersections of masculinity, familial relations, and the artistic and intellectual pursuits of Black culture. He studied fashion, house music, and dance club culture before receiving an MFA in photography at Columbia College, where he currently serves as an adjunct professor teaching artists at the Center for Community Arts Partnership at Columbia College, Chicago. His work has been exhibited both nationally and internationally, with works in the permanent collections of the Cleveland Art Museum, Chicago Bank of America LaSalle Collection, and the Harris Bank Collection. He was awarded the Joyce Foundation Midwest Voices and Visions Award, the Arcadia Award, the Smith's Benevolent Society, Lucerne Switzerland Residency, and the Three Arts Teaching Artist Award. If you haven't heard of these, they're wonderful awards to have, and you can come up later. He participates in the Light Works Artist in Residence program in July 2013, and he's currently an artist in residence at, I'm forgetting the space. Latitude, which is a community-run digital darkroom space that's a really great resource. So please join me in welcoming Cecil.
Thank you, Ryan. How's everybody tonight? Good. All right, well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate seeing all the faces. I was once a teacher here. This was my first teaching job before this building was built, and we had a trailer as our space, and our dark room was in, I can't remember what building it is, where we went downstairs. We had like 3 enlargers. Seems like such a long time ago, but there was really good times for me. So it's good to be back, and I always enjoy coming back to Trinity. All right, so I'm going to read a little, talk a little, of course, show some work. And although people think of the work in the gallery as my work, it's more of a collaborative work with students while I'm in residency in certain classrooms, certain schools around the city, around the country actually. So that work is collaborative. And what I'm going to do tonight is balance that work with my own personal work and how the two reinforce each other, inspire each other, sort of like I like to call it like a creative echo chamber, right? From the classroom back to the studio. I'm trained as a photographer, as Ryan mentioned, and at Columbia College. But increasingly my work deals with video, sound, and performance. My first creative job was as a DJ, and I still do that in my basement by myself. Right? But now I'm using those skills to create soundtracks and like ambient inspired ideas as well that will go with the videos and films that I'm making in nightclubs and things like that. So I thought I would show you tonight how those things are coming together. Okay, so this is personal work. This is from the series Domestic Observations and Occurrences. It's the next 3 slides would be from that same project. And it's a project I started right after grad school, actually my last year of grad school. I came late to art making. As you mentioned, I was first in fashion merchandise, and I did that. I was a menswear buyer for like 10 years. So I came late to art making. And so I left grad school in 2007, so it hasn't been that long, right? Actually, Baker was the one that said, hey, you need to go to grad school, all right? So this is from that series. This was done while in residency at the incubator at the University of Chicago in 2013. When I look at this, I'm reminded of the quote by Thomas Hirschhorn. You know the work of Thomas Hirschhorn? No? Yeah, you look him up. Really interesting guy. He has this quote that he's not interested in, this is paraphrasing, he's not interested in political art, but interested in working politically as an artist. And that's how I think about my work. So my works are not about, they don't scream politics, but they definitely come from a political point of view, a political way of thinking about the world. Unlike Thomas, I am very much interested in aesthetics and quality. He has this thing, energy, but low quality. I'm like, oh, I'm a photographer, I'm an image maker, so I'm always interested in the quality and the aesthetics of things, right? So this series came out of a desire to see people of color, black people in particular, represented in a society that's kind of bereft, not kind of, is bereft of the kind of like what I like to think of the middle of the road person. So we have plenty of images of what I like to think of violence being perpetrated on black people, black pain, black suffering, starving children. We have plenty of images like that, and that's one pole. On the other side, we have celebrity blackness, right? Really rich and famous, athletes, right? And you would think that there's no one in the middle. Like, where are those regular people, right? And so they're here in my pictures. So those are my conceptual motivations when thinking about these works, and I want you to think about them as you look at them. But however, formally, I'm very interested in a more highly stylized image, where aesthetics are very important to me. I'm looked to the cinema, filmmaking, theater. These works are all highly staged and thought about and executed in a directorial mode. So everything you see here is meant to be to give you the appearance that, keep that time for me too, give you the appearance that they just happen, but they are not. They are highly, artifice is definitely a part of the photograph, right? So the idea is to make a, make extraordinary pictures of people who are extraordinarily ordinary. That's a mouthful, right? Did you get that, right? Also in an ordinary environment. So they won't be places that you won't recognize. They'll be in the kitchen, they'll be in the bathroom, they'll be sitting on the sofa. So those are places that I'm thinking about that have really nothing, they're not charged places of color for any, or gender or any of those things. They're just places that are normal that we all kind of recognize. Also, they're not thought about or conceived as portraits either. They're images of individuals inhabiting a space, particularly living out that moment for us, for the camera, and by extension the viewer, right? Just to give you some idea of how they come into being, I may meet someone, so these people are either my friends, people I befriended, sometimes they are, it's very rare someone to ask for a photograph, but I'll see someone, meet someone after a conversation, like I think I saw him at a reading. I just kept looking at him. He was like, "Why are you looking at me?" You know. And I said, "You know what? You should let me make a picture of you." You know. So that's how the conversation starts. And then I'll do a visit, find a space in their home. I do like sketches, and then I come back, set it up, bring maybe the assistant or two, my lighting, and these are all lit. So you probably, each picture probably has 3 or 4 lighting. So if you pull back, you will see a lot of artifice on the other ends of the frame. And so those are the images are made, right? Right now I have maybe 35 of them, and we are in the process of creating a book for them, and I hope to publish them sometime next year. So, let's think about this term teaching. The official term is a teaching artist, which is different than an artist, which is different than an artist, say like Ryan, right? Which is different than someone who, are there art ed majors here? 1? How you doing? All right, 2? All right, 3, 4? It's okay, you let them know you're here. All right. and it's different than that, all right? So there's a definition here. I don't like to read from slides, but this is the only slide that I will read for, and it's the only slide that has text. Teaching artists, artists/educators. Community artists are professional artists who teach and integrate their art form, perspective, and skills into a wide range of settings. Teaching artists work with schools, after-school programs, community agencies, prisons, jails, and social service agencies. Increasingly, we know that art processes, art experimentation are very important and find their way and can be a thread that kind of moves through all different sorts of professions. I'm often called to do professional development as an artist with attorneys. I did one with some insurance brokers. I did one with, I'm trying to think of the really out there ones. I guess insurance brokers are as good as we can get. But you find yourself in different places as an artist, now increasingly more. And I often found myself going, wow, I never thought I would be in this particular space, invited as an artist, right? Because when I was growing up, an artist was always considered an outsider, right? And this is before the professionalization of art, right? Because you know, for some time, you didn't go to school to become an artist. You just did art, right? And then it became professionalized. You got a degree and things that went along with that. So you may be practicing as an artist and you're learning things that will take you along that path, but you'll find that those skills that you possess and you are nurturing as an artist are sought after in many other fields. So part of my practice occupies a very unique space as an artist in a classroom. So these are not made after school by myself. They are usually done in conjunction with a classroom teacher, oftentimes another artist, a writer, a poet. I usually try to work with someone who possesses some other skill set that I may be familiar with but not known in the field for being a writer, or not known for being a performance artist or a poet, right? And I try to partner with those people. And then ultimately the students are the ultimate collaborator. So this includes planning, so we write curriculum, much like you learn how to do as an art ed major, all the way down to the execution of the work, showing them how to make photographs, right, printing, and the exhibition of the work. So these works are exhibited in the school. In some cases, they are on permanent display. What else should I say about that? Okay, I'll just move on. So, and for this project in particular, Regulo, so this comes right out of my thinkings about the previous work that I showed you, where I asked students to think about the most ordinary, boring things that they did, because I understand that they are inundated with images of violence, that they, neighborhoods and the way they're thinking about their lives is always centered around that they're in a condition, that they are problematic, that wherever they come from is a problem. I'm like, well, let's try to think about the things that are not problematic. Like, what's boring in your life? Let's go make photographs about that, because they exist in that space like everyone else, right? They were given disposable cameras at this time. Wow, this is a long time ago, disposable cameras, right? So I think I've used a disposable camera in a while. Hold on. They were given cameras, they went and made photographs of that activity, right? They bring me back the images, I printed them out, and then they were asked to make a list, 20 words that describe the activity and or the photograph itself, and then they whittled that down to the 3 words that you see on the photograph. These were blown up as billboards and placed throughout their neighborhoods, right next to the liquor ad, right next to the scantily clad model in that ad. They were kind of dispersed all throughout the neighborhood. So again, it was about this kind of ordinary existence and how it could exist as photographers, writers, right, in this case, but also getting the agency of creating and being responsible for your own image, because oftentimes the image is handled by, created by someone else. Before this, we created little advertising agencies in the classroom, and then that's when they came up with the tagline, regular equals 1, 2, 3, whatever the 3 words were. So. This is the next project, which is in the gallery now, called Crate Classics. This is directly out of my love for DJ culture, music in general, dance culture, and the idea that a record album, the 12-inch, could be a space for cultural, political, social engagement. That photograph, because it's a big album, it's 12 inches. So it's a lot of room to create something that deals with some type of, that works in the spaces that I just mentioned, cultural, political spaces. Since the inception of the music industry, black people have been there from the very beginning. So we're talking like 1890s. Black people have been there at the very beginning, and mainly because it didn't require education. It didn't require an apparatus that you had to have money to buy. All you needed was your body, if you were a dancer, a voice, if you could sing, a performer, a rudimentary instrument, right? And you could travel easily with those things from place to place, right? So you could prove yourself without a major power structures approving it for you, right? It's also the only place where black people are deemed to be, or blackness are deemed to be, a genius, right? So everybody says a black musician can be a genius. You may not say that about a black person in any other field, right? So that's why they've been there before. That's why we associate music with black people in particular, because of that inception. So my partner, Avery R. Young, we thought about that, and so we brought in like these crates and crates of records. We had teachers in the school bringing their record albums, and we just spent the day looking at an album cover from different periods, different decades, and then what are those things trying to, because if you look at album covers from 1960s, they're very different, they're very politicized, right? Versus 1980s was a lot slicker, right? 1970s is like all about disco. So you get all of, you can see the culture of the country through an album cover if you just track it over time. So it was our way of, and also lastly about this piece, it was our way of introducing analog technology to students who are steeped in digital downloads and MP3s, right? So it's like, oh, this is that. You pull it out, oh, it's like actually it does something. It's like you can hold it in your hand, right? And we just love playing with that. So what you're seeing on the cover is a portrait made by a student at the bottom. Crate Classic is the title of the project. Volume 1, Chris L. is the teacher's room, and the room number is 204. On the back, they all contributed a poem, and then you have your set list or your playlist on the back. And they are in crates, and in the exhibition, we had an exhibition of the work at the Museum of Contemporary Photography at Columbia College. So we had crates and crates of records. We had an audio aspect as well, so you could hear the students reciting their poems, and then you could also thumb through the records like you would in a record store. So that, I made that body of work first, and then just this past year I started making, this is one of my works, where I am montaging dancers, performers that I met and befriended in nightclubs around the city. And I took those and montaged those on top of sheet music covers, theater advertisements from the stage and the theater, celebrity portraiture from a post-Reconstruction America. So these are like 1890s through like 1910, often racist imagery. Darktown is out tonight, references a place where black people are gathering. And then I took my images and kind of put it on top of these billboards, and not billboards, but these advertisements. I print them out to like, they're like 40 by 50. So I try to make the dancers as close to the body and space as it can be. And then they're just sandwiched on top. I like to think that if these images were available, that these artists who are black artists, so Will Marion Cook, Words and Music by, is an African-American artist, so he was able to write his own compositions, his own music, but he had no control over the imagery or what they would choose to put on top of his music as part of the distribution system. So I thought, okay, if I knew Will, he would use my images, right? He and I will be friends. This would be the person that I would be friends with. Other musicians, the people I'm friends with now, right? All my musicians friends use my work. You know, I'm always in conversation with them. So I like thinking about us talking across histories, across times, to merge these histories. And this comes directly out of my work with those album covers that I showed previously. Because I kept thinking, like, how do I deal with music and the idea of the image as a distribution system in today's market? These are just other images that follow. Let It Alone, this is Burt Williams. Burt Williams is like one of the early African-American blackface artists. He performed in blackface long after everyone else stopped performing in blackface. And I'm always cracking up at this because now people get in trouble if they are in blackface. Like if you go for Halloween, it's like, don't do that. Don't dress up in blackface. And so I was interested in that he still maintained that, right? And he maintained it as a person who was not a American. So he's from the Bahamas. So he's imitating. And I also love it when black people had to put on blackface. Right? Like, how ridiculous can that be, that you have to pretend to be someone that you're not, right? And then on top of that, they wore the blackface because the white men were dressing and wearing blackface. And so they said, well, you don't have to do that. You could just use us because we're the real thing, right? You don't have to pretend to be us. Let us be us. And you can just pay us. So they were businessmen. They were very much interested in being artists, right? And so they, like everyone, you figure out a way to be part of society and still do the thing that you want to do, right? But there's a lot of discussion about why did he still do that? So also in Custom B, I'm using the celebrity portraiture and then again using my people to put on top of that. In this particular picture, I'm interested in notions of love, love as a political tool, love as a weapon. Right? Could love be those things? Right? Well, I would think of love as something that's soft, mushy, right? Something you kind of reserve to do in your quiet moments, right? Love is something you profess to someone, right? But can love be something that's active, political, engaging? Can love be aggressive, right? And so I thought about how I see images of black people as being highly sexualized, violent, criminal, right? And so these images, I depict people as lovers in an embrace, in movement, even romantic with a capital R, right? In this space, they're occupying this space that's kind of transcendent. They're falling into each other, right? And then using that. And these things are happening today. Right now, there's somewhere, someplace on the south side, there's a couple dancing, right? And I love thinking about that. And for maybe 3 or 4 years, no, 5 years, I made that my business to be at those clubs making photographs of those people. And then end up using them years later in different ways than when I first made them. All right? How we doing time, Ryan? Okay. So I continued this idea of this notion of love just last year. So this is also in the gallery. This is from a school called Theodore Herzl on the west side of Chicago. As a teacher in arts, I feel you get the most from a school if you are invested in being in a school for a number of years. I started at Herzl in 2005 when I started grad school, and I'm still there to teaching off and on. Actually, I started up another residency in January. So in this particular project, we looked at love and we thought about love and like, what does love look like? So as a photographer, I'm always asking myself, what is the most abstract thing and what could it look like? Because that's my job, is to make an image out of it, right? So I looked at Kendrick Lamar's record, I, which uses the Isley Brothers, Who's That Lady sample. And it's this record about self-love, and it's a really wonderful investigation of your role in loving oneself. And I gave that to the students, and they were charged with acting out parts of the line that they chose on their own as a way to, and then we rendered those as tableaus, right? And if you think about the early work that I showed you, those are very much like tableaus, right? But I hate tableaus like if someone asked me to do one. I don't know if you ever had to do one of those. Have you been one of those public, if you ever go to professional development with artists, theater artists, they love to do tableaus, right? They said, let's do a tableau where it's like strength, and they all have to get together. So we have to do these like tableaus, and I felt really bad making them do it, but I said, okay, let's do that. And these are some of the things that they came up with, and they are about the idea of love. What do you owe to the person next to you? And they were asked to create photographs based on that. This is just one. This is a little boy questioning death, his role in killing people, which I thought was really powerful. And so I have a great story about him. He's an 8th grader now. And I first met him when he was in 4th grade. So I've seen some kids go from 5th grade to 8th grade. And now he's graduating. He wrote me a letter. He said, he said, "Dear Mr. McDonald, I wish I had listened to you when I was in 5th grade. He said, you were a good teacher. He said, you still are a good teacher. But he said, I'll listen to you more now." I just thought it was like, oh, okay. But I love that he was still reflecting on his experience and understanding his growth, right? And then being able to articulate that with me was really, it was a wonderful moment for me. So just so you know, I do go to other places, so I'm not just in the urban areas, right? So I go all over the country. This particular residency happened at a school called Webb. It's in Knoxville, Tennessee, where the wealthy send their children. I was there for 2 months. The longest residency I've ever had was 6 months at a school, but this is for 2 months. And I looked at, I thought about, I wanted to do a multi-discipline work. So there's video, installation, photography, but I didn't make any new pictures. I wanted to say, how can I work with photography without making more pictures? So I used the archive, and so I made photocopy yearbooks from 1955 through 1995. And I just used my children's birth dates as the decades to do it, right? And then the 50s were my dad's day. So my grandfather grew up in the South, and he, like many people of his generation, fled the South on the 2nd Great Migration. So there was a lot of that in there too, going back to where my family came from, right? And so I created these negs. I photocopied them, converted them to negatives, and then placed them throughout the entire, they have this huge atrium in the library. And so what happens is when the sun cuts through the building, the faces, they all are all on the tables. And so when students are studying, I thought it was a way of interacting with history, right? So and with that, I thought about thinking about photography's role in constructing history, right? Thinking about photography as the archive, right? Because we keep, photographs grow and become more important over time, right? So the photograph that you make today, you may say, oh, I like this picture, it's interesting, but usually a really good one, right? One that has generalities that we all can understand, but some that are very particular to you or your family, they increase like tenfold over time. So a picture today really grows. And so I thought about that. I had access to all of these images, and I like thinking about looking at that as a way for me to understand the contemporary condition as it existed. And then I said, okay, let's take these pictures and go back to the new students. So I went to like the high schoolers, I went to the senior class, and I went to the 8th grade class, and I went to the 5th grade class. Those are kind of like benchmark grades. And I handed them stacks of pictures, and then they were asked to write the narrative of that person's life. What do you think happened to them? All right, these are your former, you all share the same history in that you're from Tennessee, you are you all went to the same school. What do you think happened to them? Write their story for me. And then I took those texts and treated them like found poems, and then we created this a little short film. It's not a film, but it's a. I'll just let you look at a few of them. So I like thinking that the students will somehow tell me something about themselves through this. This is my sneaky way of doing that, right? Because I ask you about yourself, you will color it, you have filters, right? But I tell you to write about someone else, you know, your mind will start. I think what you think about yourself and your situation will kind of fit and like slide into that description, and it started to happen. And I just thought about a TV going in and out of focus, and then letting it come up. It was interesting. The teachers are really kind of, and some of the teachers were shocked at some of the things they were saying, because it's a really palatial place. It's a beautiful setting. It sits on all these acres. You would think, what could be wrong here, right? But there were so many issues, so many things regarding everything from body imagery to the pressure of being at this place because of like the academics there. Some of them are just funny. Some of them address the idea of being actually photographed. Not yet. So when you're working in schools, you often will work with a teacher to try to see A+ girlfriends. So this played on a loop in the library with those images that you saw in the mirror. We did some other things as well. See, he even says me 30 years ago, you know, like he's making direct connections with the faces. So that's like 1950s pearls, you know. So when I look at them now, I can see the photograph that they're responding to in my head. So, you know, some of it is a lot of typical angst that you see in children that age. I'm sorry, I keep getting distracted if I'm talking. Yeah, but again, it was a way for me to get them to review, and I'm always interested in that. So oftentimes people say, well, Cece, you're doing social justice work. I don't think of it as that at all. I think it's more as self-preservation, teaching students to find a way to make their own way in the world. And I'm not there to save anyone. I can't do that. I'm only there for 16 weeks, right? So none of that's going to happen. And it's just, it was, so you find yourself in a very particular way, again, not trying to be anyone's savior, but just trying to give people the tools that art making has done for me, what it's done for me, And I want them to have that same experience, and that's what I'm always after. Right? I'll let you look at one more. All right. And so, and then we kind of work our way back. So 2 weeks ago, I had an installation, a permanent public art piece installed on the CTA Red Line in Chicago at the Hyde Park location when you get off at 55th before you go to University of Chicago. And they are negatives that were installed in glass, but they're like 13 feet, right? And it came directly out of me using those negs at that school. CTA have this really weird legal thing where if you're going to use a person, that person can't have a record. Not only can't they have a record, they refer, I said, well, how do you know? They said, we don't want them to have a record, and preferably, we don't want them to have one, eventually have one. I said, okay. So I was able to use my children, myself, and the gentleman over here on the left. And if you remember this picture, that's like the first one I showed you from the domestic series. So that's like your work being used in a multiplicity of ways, right? You thought of them as flat photographs that hang on the wall, and 6 years later they become negatives in a CTA installation that I never thought would happen or occur, right? And again, that came directly from me working in Knoxville. And so I'm always looking for those connections where then I realized, I said, oh, you give your students your ideas and you let them work it out first. And then you see, oh, it works like that. It could do this, it could do that. And then you take off with it and then you say, okay, this is what I'm doing. Because they are my ideas. But they're like, I think of them now as my helpers, you know. They're my studio mates, right? I'm like, guys, this is what we're going to do. I heard this record today. Let's see how this works, right? And so, yeah, so I think this is coming full circle. And again, this was just 2 weeks ago, right? And so that's it. So, got time? Yeah, all right.